You're listening to Sound Money from Casey Research.
Hello and welcome to the show with me, your host Andy Duncan, coming to you from London. My guest today is Professor Werner Antweiler of the Sauder School of Business at the University of British Columbia, coming to us from Vancouver in Canada. Tonight we'll be talking about Bitcoin, monetary economics, and what the professor thinks of the developing economic situation in Japan and Europe. Hello, Werner.
Hello, Andy.
Now, since 1971, when the US closed the gold window, we've effectively had the petrodollar as the world's reserve currency, and we could be seeing interesting things going on with different monies coming into play. One of the main monies that the global libertarian community has been talking about is Bitcoin. Could you tell us what you think about Bitcoin?
Well, we have seen a rise of a new set of currency called a cryptocurrency that is entirely digital and can be traded worldwide on a number of different exchanges. So the idea was that computer scientists develop a new set of safe communication protocols to safeguard this cryptocurrency, and we could be exchanging money worldwide in an instant and at much lower costs than we previously could, exchanging dollars for pounds and for euros. That is the promise that Bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies could lower the transaction cost for everybody from consumers to merchants. The reality that we are now looking at, of course, is a little bit more nuanced. We have seen that the prices of Bitcoins have been going through the roof and have been falling down again. So we'll see how things develop.
And do you think, say, in 10 or 15 years' time, we could have a global currency that looks very much like Bitcoin? Or is it always going to be something which is on the edges of economics?
Well, I am a bit skeptical that Bitcoins will replace our euros and pounds and dollars anytime soon, because for a money to function, we have to have trust in it. It has to be ubiquitous. It has to be something you can easily save for the future. And when it comes to some of the basic money functions, Bitcoins aren't delivering what money does. It's currently not actually very useful as a store of value because the prices have been fluctuating wildly over the last number of months. So anybody who has invested in Bitcoins at the right point has made a fortune, and people who invested at the peak actually have lost a whole lot of money. So there is a great risk that if you invest in Bitcoins, that it's essentially like any other commodity that you're holding as an asset. It may go up or it may go down, but it's certainly not something you can take for granted that it will keep its value over time.
Now, we've seen Jim Rickards predicting that there will be the end of the dollar coming up soon as the world reserve currency. Now, he predicts that trust will go into something like the IMF's SDR. What do you think of Mr. Rickards' prediction?
Well, I think the dollar is still here to stay. A lot of people have predicted the demise of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Even when the euro was introduced, some had hoped or feared that the euro would usurp the role of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And it hasn't happened, and it's very unlikely that will happen because the US is still the dominant economy in the world, and we have great trust in the Federal Reserve to keep its house in order as far as inflation is concerned.
What do you think of increasing developments such as the Russians and the Chinese having big currency swaps, swapping the yuan and the ruble, and also I think between India and China swapping the rupee and the yuan? Do you think that's of concern to anyone who's kind of behind the dollar, or is it just a peripheral thing?
Well, what we see is an emerging trend towards greater convertibility of the yuan, the Chinese currency. And that will continue as China is easing some of the controls on its currencies. It's starting to letting the currency gradually fluctuate more and more. We will see a greater role that the yuan is playing in the world economy. That will be a very gradual process, and that's not going to replace the US dollar in a year or even two, but that is something for 15 to 20 years down the line where it could play a bigger role. The Chinese economy is obviously one of the biggest in the world now, next to the United States, and so it would be quite natural for the yuan to play a bigger role than it has in the past.
Now, we've also seen in China as well, we've seen the People's Bank of China put in various restrictions on Bitcoin, such as you can't process Bitcoins into yuan in various ways. Do you think this could be slowing down Bitcoin's penetration into the world and making it volatile, or does Bitcoin just suffer from bigger problems than this?
Well, I think Bitcoins is suffering from a number of problems. The fact that some governments, including China and Russia, have put some damper on the use of Bitcoins is just reflecting great caution. The idea that they need to protect investors and citizens from the turmoil that could arise if we see a boom in that Bitcoin investment that is again taking the values through the roof without any safeguards in place. A lot of people get drawn into these frenzies, and it could easily lead to big losses for retail investors in Bitcoins. So that kind of caution is probably not misplaced. But the problems of Bitcoins are much more fundamental. Money is about trust, and we need to have trust in Bitcoins as well. And there is still a big question about if that trust is justified. A cryptocurrency doesn't mean that it's completely safe. We have seen recently with the Mt. Gox scandal that money there can be stolen too, money can be lost. And just a few days ago, we saw this Heartbleed virus making its inroads through the computer systems worldwide, that even what we take for granted as trust in electronic encryption mechanisms can fail because people make mistakes. So to the same extent that things can go wrong with ordinary currency, things can go wrong with cryptocurrencies too. They're not going to be any different.
Okay, moving back to what you might call normal currencies, one of the great dreams of the EU was to bring in the euro currency, and for that to kind of replace the Deutschmark and the franc and various other currencies in Europe, and for that euro to kind of take over the role of the dollar. What do you think the chances are of that, of the euro replacing eventually the dollar in 20 years' time, say, as the world's major reserve currency?
I think that the euro will play an increasing role in the future as the eurozone has become larger in the last number of years, and they have already weathered the first major test for its existence. And as this renewed trust that we now see in the European currency is evolving, I can see that it also gives greater confidence as a reserve currency for the long term. Overall, reserve currencies will probably reflect to some extent the size of the respective economies that are involved. And the European economic zone is rivaling the United States in size. And that means that there is potential for the euro to grow in its role as a reserve currency.
So do you think that we've then heard the last of things like Cyprus and Greece and the PIIGS countries in the Eurozone having problems? Have we overcome all of those problems, or are there still more problems to come that the euro has to get through?
Well, we can never predict the future. That's the only certainty we have. But we can say that we have weathered the first storm, and we have learned, hopefully, from this lesson that we have now better regulations in place to deal with banking risk, which it ultimately comes down to. The European Union has now put into place new banking rules as of a few days ago, and this greater oversight given to the European Central Bank will hopefully facilitate or will prevent a reoccurrence of this sort of crisis in the future.
So you think the Basel III initiatives of greater kind of capital requirements directives will prevent any further global meltdowns?
Well, I'm hopeful that we are learning from those lessons. Nothing always prepares us for those situations, and we only encounter them when they happen. But we need to learn from these experiences, as we did in the United States with the subprime mortgage crisis. The problem is that some of these lessons are too easily forgotten, that not enough momentum persists to carry through with the necessary reforms, as attention quickly shifts to other issues. What we need to do is keep up the momentum to see various reforms through and make sure that the banking oversight is going to be firm, that minimum capital requirements are in place in the future, and that certain types of instruments that have been poorly understood and have led to the problems we have seen in the United States are going to be facing more oversight.
Yeah, one of my jobs in the past was to price CDO squareds, and I still have nightmares about that. I just want to ask you one final major question, Professor. Do you think there are any other economic developments around the world that the media's missed, the kind of mainstream media's missed, that might become real problems in the next couple of years?
Well, that is an excellent question, and looking into the future is always a matter of speculating. One of the big issues certainly is with the price of commodities, and just to look at how prices evolve in energy markets. Now, we are looking at some major changes in energy markets, in particular for natural gas, that has led to some major changes in the world economy where energy is being produced and consumed. Now, it's hard to tell when exactly that will happen, but certainly some of the oil and gas resources in the Near East will eventually run dry. And when that happens in places like Saudi Arabia, there will be some major changes in adjusting to new parameters in the world economy. It's very hard to say when that will happen. We know it will happen at some point in the future, but it could be 10 or 15 years from now. Is it a great danger? Well, we can see now with the situation developing in Russia and the Ukraine about the situation in the Crimea, that there's a particular threat to gas prices in Europe. If there are trade sanctions imposed against Russia, it could mean that Europe will have to find other resources for natural gas and oil.
By the way, Casey Research is very keen on keeping right up to the minute on things like global natural gas resources. Okay, Professor, it's been great speaking to you tonight. Where's the best place our listeners can find out more about your work and more about your business school?
Well, if you go to www.sauder.gbc.ca, you will find a lot of information about what I do and my colleagues here at the Sauder School.
Fantastic. Herzlichen Dank für Ihre Zeit tonight, Professor Werner Antweiler.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
You can subscribe to Sound Money on iTunes or sign up to our subscription service at soundmoneyshow.com, where you can also listen to our growing catalogue of podcasts. These include interviews with some of the most famous speakers on money in the world. These speakers include Jim Rogers, Doug Casey, Rick Rule and Mark Farber. A special thank you today to Professor Werner Antweiler for joining us on the show, and thank you very much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.